18. Black LGBTQ+ Hollywood stars, whose love stories changed the industry forever. What if some of Hollywood's most inspiring love stories were also the ones the industry once tried hardest to ignore? Behind the red carpet's awards and carefully polished headlines are Black LGBTQ+. Couples whose relationships did more than survive. They challenged silence, broke old barriers, and changed what love in public could look like. Some found happiness after years of hiding. Others helped make visibility possible for the next generation. And the deeper you go, the more powerful these stories become. Before we begin, subscribe to Cine Legacy Vault Hollywood, because this channel doesn't just tell celebrity stories, it uncovers the truth, the history, and the love Hollywood was never supposed to spotlight. RuPaul. RuPaul did far more than build a career. He built a cultural language. Long before drag was celebrated in living rooms across America, RuPaul Charles was already pushing it into mainstream consciousness with confidence, with glamour, and a level of charisma that made people pay attention whether they were ready or not. From the breakthrough impact of supermodel You Better Work in the early 1990s to the global force of RuPaul's Drag Race, he transformed what had once been treated as fringe entertainment into a worldwide franchise. Over time, he became more than a performer. He became an institution, a symbol of self-invention, visibility, and creative control on his own terms. What makes his personal life especially intriguing is how different it feels from the size of his public image. RuPaul has spent decades at the center of a brightly lit empire, yet his relationship with Georges Lebar has always carried a striking sense of privacy. That contrast is part of what makes their story memorable. While RuPaul became one of the most recognizable queer figures in modern entertainment, Lebar remained largely outside that machinery, living a quieter life tied to ranching painting and distance from constant publicity. The two met in 1994, and instead of turning their bond into a spectacle, they allowed it to mature in its own rhythm over many years, before eventually marrying in 2017. But let me turn this back to you. In a world obsessed with exposure, is privacy sometimes the strongest proof of love? That question sits at the center of why this relationship stands out. RuPaul and Georges Lebar do not represent a love story built on non-stop headlines or public performance. They represent endurance. Their marriage suggests that even in an industry driven by constant attention, a relationship can survive by protecting its own space. For audiences, that may be one of the most compelling lessons of all. RuPaul changed entertainment by living boldly in public, but his long partnership with Lebar shows something quieter and just as powerful. Not every lasting love needs to explain itself to the world in order to be real. Wanda Sykes. Wanda Sykes has never built her career by making people comfortable. She built it by being sharp, fearless, and impossible to ignore. For years, she stood out as one of the most intelligent comedic voices in American entertainment, blending timing, social commentary, and a refusal to soften her opinions for anyone. Whether on stage, in television, writing rooms, or on screen, she developed a public identity rooted in honesty. That is part of what made her personal life carry such significance once she chose to live more openly. Her relationship with Alex Niedbalski did not become meaningful simply because Wanda is famous. It mattered because it became part of a larger cultural moment in which a black woman in comedy stepped fully into public truth. When Wanda came out publicly in 2008, it was not framed as gossip. It landed like a declaration. She was already admired, already successful, already established. That timing mattered. It showed that openness was not a phase in her story, but a deliberate act of self-definition. Around the same period, her marriage to Alex Niedbalski gave that truth a deeply personal dimension. Alex, who has largely avoided celebrity culture, brought balance to a life lived under public attention. Together, they built something that felt grounded rather than theatrical. Their family life, including raising twins, gave audiences an image rarely offered for black lesbian couples in mainstream entertainment. Not scandal, not rumor, not coded secrecy, but a real household built on love, humor, and mutual respect. So let me ask you this. When someone finally lives openly, are we witnessing reinvention or simply the end of hiding? That is what makes Wanda Sykes such an important figure in this conversation. Her story is not just about sexuality. It is about visibility with backbone. She and Alex represent a version of queer love that feels grown, stable, and unapologetically adult. For viewers, especially those old enough to remember when this kind of openness was far rarer, their relationship stands as proof that living honestly can be both deeply personal and culturally powerful. Billy Porter. Billy Porter does not enter a room quietly, and that has never been the point. His presence has always carried intention. On stage, on screen, and on the red carpet, Porter built a career around artistry that refuses to shrink itself. He is one of the clearest examples of what happens when talent, theatrical discipline, and personal truth fuse into one public identity. Broadway gave him early acclaim, but Kinky Boots and later Pose elevated him into a larger cultural force. He was not simply being seen. He was redefining who gets to be seen and on what terms. For Black gay men in entertainment, that visibility carried a weight beyond celebrity. It felt like a rival. That is why his relationship with Adam Smith mattered in a way deeper than ordinary celebrity pairing. Their story was not sold as glamour alone. It had rupture, distance, return, and maturity. They came together separated, and then found their way back to one another before marrying in 2017. That detail gives the relationship emotional texture. It suggests a bond tested by time rather than sustained by fantasy. Adam Smith, whose professional world differed from Porter's theatrical spotlight, brought a quieter counterbalance to Billy's intensity. The relationship offered a portrait of gay partnership that was not built only on image, but on reconciliation, patience, and the willingness to begin again. And let me ask you, this isn't second-chance love, sometimes more revealing than love that was never tested at all. What makes Billy Porter so compelling within this theme is that he does not separate identity from ambition. He has spoken openly about pain, survival, and the cost of living as a Black gay man in an industry that did not always welcome that truth. His marriage to Adam became part of that larger picture. Not a side note, but an extension of the life he was fighting to live out loud. Together, they came to represent not only queer visibility, but emotional resilience. For many viewers, that is the part that stays with you. Billy Porter made self-expression look fearless. His relationship made that fearlessness feel human. Colman Domingo. Colman Domingo carries the kind of screen presence that does not need noise to command attention. He brings gravity, elegance, and a calm intensity to his performances, the sort of combination that makes a viewer lean in rather than sit back. Over the years, his work across theater, television, and film turned him into one of the most respected actors of his generation. But within the context of Black gay visibility, his significance goes even further. Domingo represents a form of queer presence that is neither reduced to stereotype nor forced into apology. He stands as a leading man, a serious artist, and a public figure whose identity is not hidden behind the work. It exists alongside it with dignity. That is part of why his relationship with Raul Domingo resonates so strongly. Their story does not live on excess publicity. It lives on steadiness. In a culture that often mistakes volume for importance, their partnership offers something different. Longevity shaped by privacy, routine, and emotional grounding. Their connection began in an almost cinematic way, yet what followed was not fantasy, but real life built over years. As Colman's public stature continued to grow, Raul remained the quieter half of the equation, not erased but intentionally less visible. That dynamic matters. It shows that a gay relationship in public life does not have to perform itself constantly to matter deeply. So let me ask you, isn't there something powerful about a love story that survives without turning itself into a show? That is what gives their relationship weight. Colman Domingo's rise has happened in full public view. But the emotional center behind that rise has often been described as the stability he shares with his husband. For Black gay audiences especially, that image carries importance. It offers a version of success that does not require sacrificing softness, commitment, or personal truth. Their partnership suggests that visibility can be graceful rather than loud, and that queer love in Hollywood does not always have to arrive through spectacle. Sometimes it arrives through endurance, mutual respect, and the quiet certainty of two people who chose each other and kept choosing each other as the world changed around them. Don Lemon. Don Lemon spent years as one of the most recognizable faces in American television news, a space not always known for rewarding vulnerability. He built his reputation on directness command and a willingness to address social tension in ways that often sparked strong reactions. But outside the newsroom, another side of his life gradually became more visible: his relationship with Tim Malone. Within the context of Black gay representation that mattered. Not because gay love needed celebrity validation, but because public figures in news have historically been expected to project authority without exposing much of their emotional world. Lemon's partnership began to challenge that old model by showing that visibility and credibility do not have to cancel each other out. His relationship with Tim Malone unfolded in a way that felt modern, public enough to be seen, but still personal enough to feel genuine. Over time, the two shared glimpses of their life together through travel daily moments and eventually a proposal that became widely talked about for its sweetness and originality. Their marriage in 2024 gave the story a new sense of permanence. Yet what makes them interesting within this theme is not simply the wedding itself. It is the image they project together, two men building an openly affectionate, emotionally legible partnership in a public sphere that once made that kind of openness difficult for Black gay men, especially in journalism. So here's the question. When powerful men allow the public to see tenderness, does that change how masculinity itself is understood? That question helps explain why Don Lemon and Tim Malone matter beyond tabloid interest. Their relationship exists at the intersection of sexuality, media, visibility, race, and public masculinity. It challenges old assumptions about what a Black man in a high-profile news role is supposed to look like, sound like, or hide. For audiences, especially those who came of age in more guarded decades, that carries real significance. Their story does not ask to be sensationalized. It asks to be recognized for what it is: a very visible example of gay partnership entering a professional world that once left almost no room for it. Robin Roberts. Robin Roberts represents a different kind of visibility from many of the names on this list. She did not become famous through spectacle, fashion, or controversy. She became beloved through trust. For years, audiences welcomed her into their mornings as a familiar and reassuring presence on American television. That matters when we talk about Black gay representation, because Robin's place in media was built on credibility, warmth, and resilience rather than reinvention. Her relationship with Amber Lawn became meaningful, not because it was dramatic, but because it quietly expanded what viewers were used to seeing in a public woman they already respected. What makes their story so moving is the role partnership played during Robin's most difficult years. Serious health battles often strip public life down to what is real, and in Robin's case, Amber was not presented as a decorative figure on the sidelines. She was a sustaining force. That kind of loyalty changes how a relationship is perceived. It stops feeling like biography and starts feeling like testimony. For many viewers, especially older ones, their bond carries a very specific emotional power. It reflects devotion, proved through treatment, uncertainty, recovery, and time. When they married after many years together, the moment felt earned rather than staged. So let me ask you this. Isn't the deepest form of love often revealed not in celebration, but in endurance? That is why Robin Roberts and Amber Lanegan matter so much within this subject. They present queer love not as rebellion alone, but as steadiness. Their story broadens the image of Black LGBTQ+ partnership in media by attaching it to care, patience, and everyday strength. In a culture that often rewards noise, They remind audiences that some of the most influential relationships do their work quietly. Robin became a symbol of courage long before her marriage became public history. But her life with Amber added another layer to that courage, the willingness to let the world see that love, too, had been part of her survival. Niecy Nash. Niecy Nash brought something unusual to Hollywood long before her marriage became headline news. She had timing, emotional range, and a rare ability to move between comedy, drama, and vulnerability without losing her distinct voice. That versatility made her a familiar and admired figure, but her relationship with Jessica Betts gave audiences a glimpse of something even more powerful than performance, personal truth arriving on its own schedule. In a culture obsessed with labels, timelines, and assumptions, Niecy's love story felt disruptive in the best way. It challenged the idea that identity must always follow a path that outsiders can predict. Jessica Betts, an artist in her own right, did not enter the picture as a prop in somebody else's transformation. She brought her own creative energy, her own musical background, and her own sense of grounded confidence. Together, the two formed a partnership that came across as playful, affectionate, and deeply chosen. That is a crucial distinction. Their relationship was not framed most memorably as scandal or surprise, but as recognition. Niecy did not present it as becoming someone else. She presented it as finally standing beside the person who fit. For many viewers, especially those who have lived long enough to know how complicated love and self-knowledge can be, that made the story resonate on a deeper level. And tell me honestly, who says the most important version of your life has to begin early in order to be real? That question helps explain why Niecy Nash and Jessica Betts hold such power within this theme. Their marriage became more than entertainment news. It became an example of queer love entering the mainstream through joy rather than tragedy. They gave Black lesbian visibility a sense of ease, chemistry, and emotional adulthood. For audiences, that matters. Their story suggests that authenticity does not always arrive when the world expects it. Sometimes it arrives later, clearer and stronger after a person has learned enough to recognize what love actually feels like. Da Brat. Da Brat occupies a fascinating place in this story because her journey combines hip-hop history, public reinvention, and queer visibility in a space that was not always welcoming. Long before her private life became part of the conversation, she had already secured her legacy as a major rap figure from the 1990s. Her success made her a pioneer, but her openness years later gave that success a second cultural meaning. When she publicly embraced her relationship with Jessica Judy Harris Dupart, it did not feel like a small celebrity update. It felt like a release. For an artist whose earlier era was shaped by tighter expectations around gender and sexuality, that shift carried enormous symbolic force. What made the relationship stand out was not simply that it was visible. It was visible with confidence, affection, and a clear sense of adult commitment. Judy did not come into the story as a background figure either. She was already an entrepreneur with her own following, her own business empire, and her own public identity. Together, they created an image of Black queer love that was glamorous without seeming hollow. Viewers could see romance, humor, luxury, and family building unfolding in real time. That last part mattered deeply. Their path toward marriage and parenthood moved the story beyond dating into something that felt generational. So let me ask you this. When love becomes visible in a world that once demanded silence, doesn't it change more than just one couple's life? That is exactly why Da Brat and Judy matter here. Their union challenged old ideas inside both hip-hop culture and mainstream media. It attached lesbian visibility to celebration rather than secrecy. It also gave audiences a family narrative that felt modern, emotional, and unapologetically public. For many people, especially those who remember a more closed era in music, that transformation is the real headline. Da Brat had already made history once through her career. Her openness allowed her to make a different kind of history through the life she chose to share. Jason Bolden. Jason Bolden represents a crucial shift in how Black queer visibility works in Hollywood. He did not become prominent through acting chart success or hosting. He rose through taste. That distinction matters because it places him inside the machinery that shapes what fame looks like. As a stylist, Jason helped construct the visual authority of major stars, working in a field where image aspiration and access are everything. Yet what made him stand out beyond fashion was that he and Adair Curtis allowed their lives together to be seen not as a gimmick, but as a legitimate, ambitious, loving partnership between two Black gay men thriving in industries built on exclusivity. There is something especially powerful about that kind of representation, because it happens behind the glamour, rather than merely on the surface of it. Jason's work already positioned him in elite creative spaces, but his marriage and public life gave audiences a fuller picture of Black gay success, professional excellence, domestic life, mutual support, and style without disguise. With Adair beside him, the story widened beyond red carpet aesthetics into marriage, shared goals, and public intimacy that never felt desperate for approval. That combination is rare. It made them visible not just as individuals with talent, but as a pair whose relationship itself modeled possibility. So let me ask you, how often are the people shaping the image of Hollywood also quietly reshaping its idea of love? That question gets to the heart of why Jason Bolden matters here. He helped attach Black gay identity to aspiration, elegance, and partnership in a way that felt current and undeniable. For viewers especially, those used to seeing queer couples pushed to the margins or reduced to stereotype, Jason and Adair offered a different frame. They looked accomplished, coordinated, emotionally real, and entirely at home in their own story. In that sense, Jason's significance extends far beyond styling. He helped make Black gay visibility look expansive, refined, and fully compatible with the worlds that once acted like there was no room for it. Karamo Brown. Karamo Brown brought something fresh to public discussions of Black gay identity, emotional intelligence as visibility. In a culture that often expects queer men, especially Black queer men, to either entertain or defend themselves, Karamo became known for something softer and more difficult. He made empathy part of his public image. Through television, he built a reputation as someone who could guide, listen, and challenge people without humiliating them. That made his relationship with Carlos Medel resonate in a very particular way. It felt connected to the same values he projected on screen: honesty, care, family, and emotional courage. What gave their story extra meaning was that it unfolded alongside Karamo's identity as a father. That element shifted the picture dramatically. Too often, gay male representation has been flattened into either style or struggle. Karamo complicated that by embodying nurture, responsibility, and partnership at the same time. His engagement to Carlos created a public image of Black gay domesticity that felt both modern and deeply grounded. Even though the relationship eventually ended, its visibility still mattered. It showed audiences a version of love that included parenthood, commitment, vulnerability, and everyday structure, rather than just romance in isolation. So let me ask you, when people finally see Black gay men represented as partners and parents, doesn't that expand the culture's imagination of what family can be? That is why Karamo Brown remains such an important figure within this conversation. His relationship with Carlos Medel was not important because it lasted forever. It was important because it broadened the frame. It allowed viewers to see Black gay life through a lens of maturity and care rather than stereotype. For many, that image carries lasting value even after the romance itself changed. Karamo's significance comes not only from his visibility, but from the emotional vocabulary he brought with it. He made openness look strong, and he made tenderness look credible. In a media landscape that often confuses masculinity with distance, that may be one of the most radical contributions of all. Samira Wiley. Samira Wiley's significance within this topic comes from the way art and identity intersected in public view. She became widely recognized through a role that resonated emotionally with audiences, but what made her personal story especially compelling was how closely it connected to a broader narrative about queer self-discovery, creative collaboration, and chosen family. Her relationship with Lauren Morelli did not emerge from gossip culture. It grew out of work-shared perspective and the emotional intimacy that can form when two people are building stories in the same demanding environment. That origin gave their love story a tone that felt thoughtful rather than manufactured. There is something especially meaningful about a Black queer woman being visible in a marriage that began through collaboration and deepened into domestic life. Samira and Lauren offered a picture of lesbian partnership that felt creative, affectionate, and emotionally literate. Their relationship also carried another layer. It was tied to a period in which both women were coming more fully into public understanding, not only as professionals, but as people. For viewers, that made the story feel alive rather than symbolic. It was not just about being seen. It was about becoming known. So let me ask you, when love begins in a place of creative honesty, doesn't it? Sometimes reveal truths neither person could have reached alone. That is why Samira Wiley holds such an important place here. Her marriage to Lauren Morelli expanded the image of Black queer womanhood in mainstream entertainment by attaching it to tenderness, artistic respect, and family building. Their journey suggested that queer love can emerge not only through rebellion, but through recognition, through working closely enough to see one another clearly. For audiences, that is a quietly powerful message. Samira's visibility has always carried emotional weight because she projects both strength and heart. Her relationship deepened that perception. It showed that love, when grounded in mutual understanding, can become more than biography. It can become an example of how authenticity and partnership grow side by side. Lena Waithe. Lena Waithe belongs to a different branch of this story because her impact has always been tied to authorship. She did not simply appear within the culture, she helped write it. That matters enormously when talking about Black queer visibility because representation gains different power when the person shaping the narrative also lives inside its questions. Lena's public identity has long been connected to race, sexuality, and the politics of being seen, and her relationship with Alana Mayo amplified that conversation by placing two Black queer women with real industry influence inside the same frame. Their partnership looked like a modern power structure made intimate. What gave their story weight was not only romance, but symbolic presence. Here were two accomplished women, each moving through major entertainment spaces, each attached to creation, decision-making, and cultural influence. Their marriage, though brief, carried significance beyond duration. It suggested that Black queer love in Hollywood could be associated with authorship, intelligence, ambition, and private confidence. Even after their separation, that image did not disappear. The relationship had already done cultural work, simply by being visible at all. So let me ask you, does a relationship lose its importance just because it didn't last forever? Or can impact exist separately from permanence? That question is central to understanding Lena Waithe within this theme. Her relationship with Alana Mayo remains meaningful not because it ended ideally, but because it expanded what audiences could picture. It showed Black queer women not as supporting figures orbiting the industry, but as powerful participants shaping its future. For viewers, that matters. Visibility is not only about longevity. It is also about who gets to be imagined as central, capable, and deserving of love in the first place. Lena's significance comes from that broader shift. She helped create space not merely for representation, but for authorship with identity still intact. Lee Daniels. Lee Daniels stands out in this subject because he represents queer visibility from a place of power behind the camera. He is not known primarily as a performer whose private life became public interest. He is known as a builder of worlds. Through film and television, Daniels created stories that forced mainstream audiences to confront race, class, pain, ambition, and desire in more emotionally charged ways. That matters because representation changes when the people creating the frame are also living the truths the frame has historically excluded. His relationship with Jahil Fisher therefore carries meaning beyond biography. It sits beside a career already associated with disruption. What makes that especially significant is the contrast between Daniels's public creative force and the relative privacy of his long partnership. Fisher did not become part of the story through spotlight seeking. He remained more protected from the machinery of celebrity, which in turn made the relationship feel less performative and more sustaining. In a demanding industry, that kind of private stability often shapes public achievement more than audiences realize. Daniels's work has long pushed against silence around Black queer existence. His relationship gave a quieter but equally important example of what that existence could look like when grounded in support. So let me ask you, how much cultural change is made not only by the art people see, but by the relationships that help artists survive long enough to make it? That idea is central to Lee Daniels' place in this conversation. He and Jahil Fisher represent a form of Black-gay partnership tied to durability, maturity, and creative survival. Their story is not as widely dramatized as others, but that does not make it smaller. In some ways, it makes it stronger. It shows that queer visibility in Hollywood is not only about being front and center. It is also about who gets to build, who gets to love privately, and who gets to remain whole while making work that changes the culture around them. Tituss Burgess. Tituss Burgess brings a different shade of gay visibility to this conversation. Flamboyance with discipline underneath it. His public persona is unforgettable, bright, theatrical, musically gifted, and often hilarious. But what makes his significance larger than personality alone is that he carved out space for a Black gay performer to be extravagant without being reduced to a joke. That is harder than it looks. Burgess demonstrated that boldness and technical excellence could live in the same body. His relationship with Pablo Salinas, though much more private than his stage presence, added another layer to that image by suggesting that behind the showmanship was a life built on real intimacy and support. That contrast matters. Audiences often assume that people who radiate such strong public energy must live entirely in performance mode. A quieter relationship interrupts that assumption. It reveals that theatricality in public does not cancel out sincerity in private. Burgess and Salinas came to represent a partnership not defined by constant exposure, but by steadiness, beneath a high-profile creative life. For gay representation, especially Black gay representation, that carries a subtle importance. It allows flamboyant expression to coexist with emotional seriousness. So let me ask you this. Why do people still act surprised when someone dazzling in public also wants peace in private? That question gets at the heart of Tituss Burgess's place in this theme. He helps broaden the imagination of what Black gay life can look like by refusing narrow roles. He can be funny without triviality, glamorous without emptiness, and expressive without losing depth. His relationship with Pablo Salinas did not need to dominate headlines to matter. Its importance came from balance. It showed that joy, creativity, romance, and privacy could exist together. For audiences used to oversimplified images, that kind of complexity is not minor. It is its own form of progress. Todrick Hall. Todrick Hall represents one of the most digital-age versions of Black gay visibility on this list. He did not rely on a single traditional gatekeeper to become known. He built attention through the internet, through self-made spectacle, through choreography, music, performance, and relentless output. That route matters because it reflects a generation in which queer identity could be broadcast more directly, more stylized, and more globally than before. Hall's relationship with David Borum fit naturally into that ecosystem. It was visible through curated glimpses, shared aesthetics, and a public sense of two creative people moving in sync. What makes that significant is not just youth or glamour. It is the way their visibility linked gay partnership with artistic ambition and confidence. Rather than hiding romance away from a creative brand, Hall folded love into a world already defined by bold self-presentation. For some viewers that may seem ordinary now, But it was not always ordinary, especially for Black gay men, whose public lives were once shaped by caution. The relationship suggested that queer love could be integrated into a larger artistic identity rather than treated as a secret subplot. So let me ask you, when younger generations show love with this much openness, are they simply being bold, or are they benefiting from ground earlier couples had to fight to clear? That perspective helps explain Todrick Hall's role in this theme. His story with David Borum reflects a newer era of representation, one shaped by social media, visual branding, and confidence in being seen. Yet beneath the polish, the significance remains familiar. Love made visible, partnership tied to creativity, and Black gay identity presented without apology. For many audiences, especially older ones, that visibility may feel newer than it is. But that is exactly the point. It shows how far public culture has moved, and how much that movement owes to people willing to place both their talent and their truth in front of the camera. Big Freedia. Big Freedia brings the subject of gay and queer visibility into a cultural zone that has often been treated as especially resistant Southern hip-hop space. That alone gives her story unusual weight. She did not emerge from an industry corner already eager to celebrate difference. She came out of a regional sound, a local identity, and a performance tradition that had to fight for legitimacy before it could even be argued over. Her relationship with Devin Hurst therefore mattered beyond the personal. It helped humanize an artist whose public image was already larger than life, placing intimacy beside a career powered by movement energy and command. What makes that important is the way it disrupted assumptions. Big Freedia's world is loud, rhythmic, physical, and often ecstatic. Pairing that with an openly visible relationship gave audiences another entry point into queer Southern experience. It suggested that love and support existed not outside that culture, but inside it. Even though the relationship did not last, its presence still contributed to visibility. In spaces where queer Black lives have often been erased or pushed to the edges, even temporary openness can have lasting cultural value. So let me ask you, when a genre expands enough to hold truth it once tried to push away, isn't that its own form of revolution? That is why Big Freedia matters in this conversation. Her public and private life together helped challenge the idea that queer visibility belongs only in certain polished corners of entertainment. She brought it into bounce, into regional music, into Southern performance culture, and into everyday emotional reality. Her relationship with Devin Hurst may not have been the longest on this list, but its importance lies elsewhere. It showed that Black queer partnership could exist visibly in places many people still assume are closed to it. That alone makes the story bigger than romance. Michael Sam. Michael Sam belongs to the edge of this Hollywood-centered list, but his inclusion makes sense because cultural visibility does not stop at studio gates. His story moved through sports television and national conversation all at once, which gave his relationship with Vito Camusano unusually public symbolism. When Sam came out before entering the NFL, he stepped into a level of scrutiny that extended far beyond athletics. In that moment, his private life became inseparable from a broader discussion about masculinity, race, sexuality, and what American institutions were prepared to accept from a Black gay man in public competition. His relationship with Vito mattered because it gave that history a human face. People were not simply reacting to a declaration. They were seeing affection. They were seeing a Black gay athlete share joy in a moment that mainstream sports culture had rarely permitted on live television. That image carried enormous symbolic force. Even though the relationship itself did not last, the cultural memory of it remains strong. Sometimes a relationship enters history not because of duration, but because of the door it opens. So let me ask you, can a single image of love change a culture more quickly than years of polite silence ever could? That question explains why Michael Sam remains important to this theme. His story pushed Black gay visibility into one of the most tradition-bound arenas in American life. The relationship with Vito Camusano helped make that breakthrough feel personal instead of abstract. It reminded audiences that representation is not only about announcements or firsts, it is also about tenderness being witnessed in places where it was once unthinkable. For viewers especially, those who remember how rigid professional sports culture used to feel, that image still lands with force. It marked a shift not just in who could compete, but in who could be loved openly while doing it. Jason Collins. Jason Collins represents another turning point where Black gay visibility crossed into a space built on rigid ideas of manhood. His importance was never about flamboyance or celebrity theater. It came from directness. He was an NBA veteran, a figure associated with team sports discipline and locker room culture, and that background made his openness carry unusual force. When his relationship with Bronson Green became public, it extended that force into another arena by connecting sports and entertainment in a way audiences were not used to seeing. It suggested that queer Black identity was not confined to any one profession or presentation. What makes that significant is the way it challenged old separations. For years, sports and Hollywood often projected different versions of masculinity, but both could be equally restrictive when it came to openly gay Black men. Collins and Green, in their own way, blurred that divide. They represented visibility that was neither flamboyant nor hidden, simply present. There is power in that. Not every breakthrough has to arrive in sequins or speeches. Some arrive in the plain fact of a life no longer edited to fit older expectations. So let me ask you, isn't ordinary visibility sometimes the most radical thing of all when a culture has spent decades insisting it shouldn't exist? That is why Jason Collins matters within this theme. His relationship with Bronson Green may not dominate popular memory the way some others do, but it contributed to a larger shift in what Black gay life could look like across public fields. It helped move queer visibility away from being treated as exception and toward being treated as reality. For audiences that matters deeply. Representation grows not only through iconic couples at the center of pop culture, but also through quieter pairings that prove openness can inhabit places once defined by silence. Here's the question that refuses to go away. Are these love stories proof that Hollywood has truly changed? Or has the industry simply learned how to celebrate visibility while still holding real power back? These couples broke silence, challenged old assumptions, and made Black LGBTQ+ love impossible to ignore. But progress on camera is not always the same as equality behind it. That is why this conversation matters. If this story moved you, subscribe to Cine Legacy Vault Hollywood for more untold Hollywood history. Deeper truth and powerful stories they rarely tell in full. And now tell us in the comments, has Hollywood really evolved, or is it still catching up?